come. So it's within that, I think it's still manageable, even given OPEC projections and the America's Energy Institute projection on possible demands, expectation, and projection for crude going into 2021. So I think all the figures are really conservative. Foreign exchange expectation 379.
Before you get into the forex benchmark of 379, I still would like us to dwell a bit on the crude oil aspects, namely dollar price of $40 per barrel. That's the crude oil price of $40 per barrel, and production levels of 1.86, including condensates. Now, a number of energy experts have argued that the quota we get from OPEC is actually a function of our volume capacity. But that volume capacity has been constrained in recent years by lack of investment. Additionally, by divestment by the majors from that. But that the game changer in the oil and gas industry would be the PIB. So what additional responsibility, if not immediate responsibility, does this then impose on the National Assembly? Because the potential investors are out there waiting to see what the new framework will be for players in the oil and gas industry. We've heard that, they will pass the PIB by the end of the first quarter, but we know that it's a long haul. But what does that mean?
Well, there's absolutely no question that PIB is a long-awaited institutional framework, legislative framework to create a sea change in the oil industry, oil and gas industry. But having said that, there are other players. 75 licenses given to private modular refineries, because don't forget that the 445,000 barrels a day allowed for local processing is based on the capacity of the refineries that we have. They just added up the refinery capacity that we have and allocated for us to have that. But that, you can see how they're performing. Less than 30% of what is it. But now we know that Dangote refinery is in there now, and then as many more of the private refineries that come on stream, and so will you have more allocations to meet that capacity. So we need to ramp up that production capacity so that you can start cutting back on the forex we are wasting importing this refined product, and then begin to send out products to African countries, refined product, because we're already on January 1st open to business. So, so that's the second part of the equation. And I also think that the other area is, why is it that Texas have over 200 refineries and petrochemicals in just one state? And in the whole of our Niger Delta, why are the the 9 state governments not interested in taking part in one of the licenses? Because I'm sure they can all get licenses, or they may all have licenses. Why don't they want to put something down and have an interest so that something can be refined? Why? I want to understand why. Then secondly, African countries surrounding us, if you say to Niger, or say to Cameroon, or say to any of these countries surrounding us, allow them to invest. If they want to invest, they will invest. When they invest, they secure the supply. If any of them invest in any refinery in Nigeria, they secure the buying, and they secure the supply of the. But we're not looking at them. We are just looking at how much will India buy, how much will China buy. But we're surrounded by people that are importing petroleum products and today we are now going to buy from Niger. They are refined products. Why don't we open this business? Yes.
You gave an example of Texas. Texas started with people investing in the oil themselves without government. Then there was no United States of America. It was blood and oil that flowed for people to really understand and take charge of the oil production in Texas. Here, government is taking over all these things. Government says, I should do this. You're talking of and advocating for diversification in the oil production and refining of oil in Nigeria. Now, the committee chairman is looking beyond the benchmark of $40 per barrel, and he has, said to the government that if in case it's more than that, you can come back and, have an appropriation bill and look into it so that this money, this money can be used to fund other sectors of the economy. Is there any possibility of that?
The $40 benchmark that they proposed was based on 3-year projections of international agencies like U.S. Energy Information Service. The people that gave their projections, so they looked at different projections and saw that 40 was a 3-year. That doesn't mean that we couldn't go to 80, come back to
or maybe
20.
150.
Yeah, but it is, we follow the standards. Yeah. So that's why they went to that.
So do we foresee a supplementary bill?
Of course, we should look beyond the price of crude.
Precisely.
And look at the price of downstream, midstream. Let's look at all those. Look, the marginal oil fields, a lot of them have been sold, about half of them. There are more. Marginal oil fields are the ones less than 50 million barrels a day. Then licenses have been given out. Look, modular refinery costs $75 million for 20,000 barrels a day. Maximum $100 million, and these are modular. You put that, then you put another one when you want to expand. So you don't want. Why do you want to go into $2 billion refinery? And why do you want to take $3 billion and give to NNPC to repair? If we get the modular refineries working, those NNPC staff in the refineries will find job in these new ones, rather than sit idle. And I wouldn't advocate that you carry this big money and go and give it to them for their maintenance thing, and then you never get anything out of it. So let's energize that sector and get more people in, and get the manpower in those areas, move sideways like you did in the power sector. It baffles me that we are still talking about this today.
Yeah.
Talking about capacity, it talks definitely about our reserved, our crude oil reserve. I think at the last count it's about 42 billion. I can see a shift. The truth is that the oil majors will not be playing the huge roles they've been historically playing in Nigeria. And it's not because of Nigeria, it's the reality of global economics and politics. And there's a conscious retreat from what we call the frontline markets, the emerging markets like Nigeria, as it were. So it's not in Nigeria alone that they are retreating, the oil majors, as it were. So I can also see a growing model of localizing investments in the oil sector, as it were. So to that extent, one will be looking at what form of activities are going on in the emerging field, as the Prophet said. We will need more local players playing in that, and we have the capacity. That's the truth. We are lucky, fortunate that our capital markets, our financial markets are very strong markets. So if we need to raise funds, if investors need to raise funds in those to attend and invest in those areas, the funds are available. So what I am sure of is that the NNPC too is also doing a lot in the exploration front. I understand now that they found commercial quantity, crude oil commercial quantity in the Benue Trough and in the Chad Trough. So these are virgin troughs, and there are possibilities, to add to our reserve. So I think going forward, this is going to be a Nigerian-focused investment orbit, as it were.
You were going to talk about the dollar exchange rate at 379.
Yeah.
It remains, even at that, it remains worrisome. And we see how inflation oftentimes tracks the exchange rates. Even the groundnut seller, those who are in the mini and micro sector of the economy, everybody blames the dollar for the increase in prices. And here we are, 379. The fundamental question to ask, in my opinion, has to be, why has it been difficult or challenging for us to grow our external reserves? And why is it that our external reserves appear to be a perpetual target for attacks by forex speculators?
Because the bulk of our expenditure really is not necessary. We spend more than 0.25% of our reserve on importing fuel, and it's a loss for us, because in our books, if we are looking at our books, we have the resources. The resources will show in our books. The end result of that resource, as it were, is imported rather than being exported. So it's a loss for us. If we are able to correct that, and the opportunity is now knocking on our doors, from Cotonou to Seme, Cotonou, even Accra and all that. And of course, Cameroon here, Niger and Chad and all that, those are open markets for us. All through to the Southern African region, selling refined products. That alone will burnish our foreign reserve, and it will save us so much, because if we are spending close to $30 billion a year importing fuel, and that's just one product, PMS. We are not talking of other chemicals that are being imported for industries that are byproducts of crude oil. Pharmaceuticals. You have a huge chemical industry complex that is worth than $150 billion, that is in comatose, as it were, and dependent, on the oil sector. You have the energy, the industry energy sector. You used to have the LPFO and the HPFO back in the days. Yes, gas is taking over now, but the LPFO and HPFO still have so many uses in the industry. Bitumen and all that. So many uses in the industry. So the truth of the matter is, in the next 40 years, either we like it or not, we will still be dependent on the efficiency outcome of our oil sector. We still need it as much as possible, even to hate our diversification. So what I'm trying to say essentially is, if we are able to properly manage the resources we have no reason, scratching our heads over reserve, over our foreign reserve. And we're talking about inflation on the positive side now. I see from the last figures we have, I can see a movement, a way to a specific challenge. The major driver of our last figures was deficiency in agricultural products. Food basket, our food inflation was high, moving from 17.25% to 18.330%. And it constitutes more than 50% of our whole inflation basket. So what we need to do is to address food production. We have seen a retreat on the core inflation. Core inflation retreated from 11.14% to 11.05%. So which means without the food inflation increasing, it's clear that our inflation rate should be declining, but for the food inflation. But generally, the two stands now that those figures have shown us. Let us be creative in how we resolve our oil and gas sector. Let us be creative in how we resolve our agricultural sector.
Well, I'm sorry, Juma, I still want to return. I can see the linkage you have made now between the agricultural sector and the oil and gas sector. Prof, well, the National Assembly, in considering the appropriation bill, has, of course, its job cut out for it. But in terms of the primary assumptions that then ground the figures on the budget, such as crude oil price, exchange rate, and so on and so forth, I didn't appear to have heard so much about what to do with the exchange rate. And we're just now discussing one of the causative factors of, shall we say, leakages in our forex regime. Namely, we spend so much on what we should not be importing. That is to say, refined petroleum products, whether AGO or DPK or PMS. Now, the National Assembly also said, look, all MDAs, including the super MDAs that we know, NNPC, CBN, must come to the National Assembly to defend their own budgets and all of that. What was NNPC presenting, for instance, with regard to the state of its 4 refineries? And you've been talking now about, look, if we were to maximize the capacity of our 4 refineries, then you have production capacity, you have crude oil capacity available for that, but it would also be a huge savings for us on our foreign reserves, and the kind of pressures that we see that, we have this so-called official exchange rate, and then the so-called parallel rate, and then the multiple rates that you have all over the place. We didn't appear to have heard so much about what to do, rather than just say, okay, fine, we're all looking at 379, that's the given. Whereas the fundamental and underlying causes of the poor state of the naira, as it were, those ones appear not to have been touched, and therefore, we are just playing victim to.
You're right.
Yes,
you're right, because the exchange rate is linked to what happens in the oil market. So whether it's $40 or whatever, it connects to the exchange rate, and the exchange rate and the distance between the official rate and the black market rate also affects what happens on the import and export. In import, because the value of the import is going to be affected by it will affect inflation. Whatever they do, they pass it through. So you have inflation pass through, and so it's all interconnected. So you need to deal with the root. And the root there's a conspiracy in the political economy of the oil sector, which we have to tackle head on. Why is it that all the known players in the world in oil production, Shell, Chevron, all of them are operating in Nigeria, but none of them wants to invest or even take over and manage one of these oil refineries? Why is it more profitable for them to send this out, collude with the oil marketers, pay all the way, export our jobs, somewhere is paying for jobs? Why is it more marketable? And I hear government say, okay, look, we are going to talk to some of these people to come and manage or concession the existing things. That didn't get anywhere. They said, okay, co-location. We will do co-location. Come and co-locate your refinery in same premises of this, and then use the infrastructure. That became a dead end. Obasanjo captured all the marginal oil fields, brought them out, and then gave them out, half of them out. Then he gave 20 licenses. Our new president gave additional 55 licenses. We've got 75 licenses. We've got all that. Those are where the answer to the problem is. How can we engage private capital? And they're not asking you to give them grant. If we bring $1 billion, just $1 billion, which is just 1/4 of what we are going to spend importing anyway, bring $1 billion and loan that to 10 private sector, 10, do to 200, 2020, that's 200,000 barrels a day. Just loan. It's not grant, it's loan. And you'll be sure that by 3 years, they will double their capacity or triple their capacity. That's what happens with private sector. We are just shying away from the real problem. And that would dramatically change the balance sheet of our economy. Of course, there are other things that we are looking at. Various assets that are lying idle that can be sweated to create more liquidity in the system, and so that the narrative around our borrowing is not just, giving them money, they're almost bankrupt. No, they look at the assets. You can leverage these assets. You can do, So we are moving at that narrative right now, and that will change the game. Of course, our national planning framework now is changing completely. So, yeah, I agree with you.
Professor Ken, you talked about conspiracy in the oil sector. So many Nigerians, at the top level have oil blocks. Why can't they invest in the refineries? They are just taking away money from the oil blocks.
I don't think I'm not against who owns the land, the oil, or whoever. No, I'm interested in the fiscal incentives
into the economy.
The fiscal incentive that look, private sector responds to incentive.
Yes.
They don't listen to any speech. No, if you create an incentive, private sector responds to that. If you say, look, okay, like you said, agriculture. Say, look, anybody that invests in agriculture, small business or big business, I will give you 5-year exemption on paying tax on the oil, on agriculture related. Then they will come in. That's how they respond. If you just create an incentive, the private sector will find the money. They have the money. They will take the risk because they can see the reward for the risk that they're going to take. It's not about pleading to them or saying to them. In fact, let to give you an idea. If you say to people who have their money abroad, I'm going to get you. You can try that. Even the countries that you are asking to remit their money back or this and that, they will 6 years. You are talking. But if you give an incentive to somebody who has huge money abroad, say, look, just bring it in. I'll give you amnesty for 5 years. That money goes to the central bank as dollar. Our reserve goes up. More people want to invest because our reserve is high. You haven't touched this money. You haven't done that. Then they start buying up properties and buying all this privatization proceeds because you've used some kind of incentive structure to allow them then they'll start investing them in. So this, and it will be happening in 24 hours because it takes you a phone call to say to your bank in Switzerland, I want that money, a certain amount of money returned here. They do that. Than fighting for 6 years, 7 years.
Yeah, Professor Kenneth, thanks. And back to NIE, because the whole idea of, say, growing the economy, which is important. I mean, for us to get out, in the first instance, get out of recession, for us to create jobs, and for us, to ride on the crest of real development, as it were. Why is it that some of these critical sectors are not being focused on? I mean, it's like the linkage between PIB and the refineries. I don't understand it in the first instance. Yes, the whole idea of unbundling NNPC is also there. The refineries, in the meantime, are in the hands of limited liability companies under the NNPC. Investors who always argued, and I've heard this argument for the past 25, 30 years, that unless you deregulate the downstream sector, nothing will happen. There's deregulation in the downstream sector now. Is there any enthusiasm that is out there in the air?
Well, the deregulation is not too clear yet. You still have Labour engaging government on prices of products, as it were, and PMS is the most how do I call it? It's the most used product in Nigeria, and as long as there are issues around the pricing, the private investor would not want to move there. There's still the need for clarity.
What kind of clarity are you?
One, on the enablement of market forces in the downstream sector specifically. Clarity on PIB. We've been hearing about PIB. I seek for information, and what I've done, I mean, so far I've not even had access to the ABCD of the PIB draft, as it were. There's so much confusion about which one exactly, is the accepted draft that is being debated, because there's an assumption of the debate going on in the National Assembly. I think there's also a need to put those drafts that are being discussed in the public space, so we can follow what exactly the National Assembly is debating about. Now, when the private investor has that opportunity, he can start gauging his own mood and temperament towards the PIB itself as an expectation. Because if the content do not serve the needs and purposes of the investor, it will be like, well, after they finished, I can't see any possibilities for me here. So there is a need to popularize the content so that people know exactly what is being discussed and what will be the outcomes. Then I think going beyond that is the need to also start, well, I don't know how to put it now, the democratization, of access to fund by the private sector. I think that one is apace now, given the rates of interest, in the marketplace. But what is essential now? What is essential now, as it were, is a focus on our food belts. It's very, very important because, especially when you look at how much the central bank had expended, in that sector.
And co-borrower scheme.
And co-borrowers and all that. We are talking so far of more than 2 trillion naira over the last 4 years, as it were. And what would you expect as an analyst would have been a resurgence, in that sector. But we're still doing less than 25% to GDP itself. We're still doing less than 3% to growth, and the undercurrent of our economy beyond oil is supposed to be agriculture. So for me, that's a major headache, because once food is provided, once Nigerians can access food, that would first impact on the level of poverty. Because however you want to measure it, either in terms of household incomes or household consumption, food is a major consideration. So once that is attended to, I think the other ones, the license we're talking about is simply metropolitan capitalism. Nobody would encourage you to refine. All the refineries in Amsterdam and all those other places, once you start refining in Nigeria, it means that you are decreasing their capacity. Exactly. So it must be a conscious act within our own national boundary to create and create momentum on that.
Conscious fact. We need to really look at that.
Something he said that I didn't.
We need to take a break now. When we return, the conversation will continue. We'll be right back.
My name is Nando Jamda Mohammed.
Stevita
Hussein Musa.
Rodina Joel Finji.
Said Musa John. I'm a carpenter. I've been doing this for more than 8 years now.
And I said that plantain. Nakai Chimami Shekara Uku.
I've been selling my tomatoes for about 10 years now, and I do it for a better Nigeria.
And
you can see how we're doing our small little work to make Nigeria great.
As you can see, I'm a technician and I'm doing it to help myself and to help my generation.
Una don't hear say them they rape about 35% of them girl picking, and even them women safe. Some of them, they even die in the process. Emotional trauma, uncle, they make some of them be like, say, they don't do this what again, they don't go, but they live like ghosts. Some of them, shame don't kuku make them go kill themselves. It's not good, though. This not be our culture. It not fit be the African way. Why we can't allow this kind of yet enjoy body with us, so they loud where. If you know they fear law where man put, you know they fear Baba God there. You self, you where they cover mouth so you see many one they happen. You know what here when the Oyibo talk say problem where they bring come out, they solve and sharply. Remember, person wey feel rape, if it's a key person, if it be you, if it be your pikin, if it be person them where you love well. So make we learn they carry women then like diamond where we be. No grief for rape.
Dialogue, empathy, love, and unity. These are vital components of nation building.
For all to be well, we appeal that we should refrain from volatile, provocative, inciting messages and language.
Let's build and not destroy.
After a 7-goal demolition at the hands of the champions last time out, will Crystal Palace enjoy a Merry Christmas when they visit Villa Park? This Saturday, it's Aston Villa versus Crystal Palace on the Premier League Live, showing on the NTA network from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Axis Bank, Baba Ijebu, Lipton, and Close Up, in association with Gold.com.
Thanks so much for rejoining us, and we've been discussing the 2021 appropriation bill, and some tweets have come in. Nigerians want to contribute to the conversation. I'll begin with Badamasi Haruna Adamu. He says it's not about passing the budget. What matters most is the implementation and the impact to the downtrodden masses. More so, there is also the need for the full use of zero budget system as a tool to checkmate the working of the budget.
Yunusa Idris tweets, I hope the budget contains the aggressive demands of ASU members as promised by the Honorable Speaker of the House.
And Steve Bond 007 tweets, time to reduce the huge allowances of senators, the highest earning senators in the world, in a nation where citizens live below $1. So ironic.
Mike Anyakwo, kudos to the National Assembly for the timely passage of the 2021 budget. We must hit the ground running immediately we enter the new year. The 2021 budget doesn't want to go slow, he writes. We have a lot to address in view of the pandemic. The budget must be administered to the letter.
And Suleiman Babagana tweets, issues around the budget should be geared towards reducing budget deficit by diversifying revenue base, bridging the gap between recurrent and capital expenditure by reduction in cost of governance and timely release of funds for important projects.
Ajani Olaoluwa, Nigeria needs to open up untapped sources of revenue so as to stem the tide of deficit budgeting.
And Festus Akimboyewa tweets, it's good that National Assembly has passed 2021 budget, but revenue generation will be a challenge. They must ensure there is a careful oversight of government expenditure to reduce waste and fraud, and federal government must set KPI for all ministries, ministry parastatals, and ensure that value for every kobo spent. While it's good that the federal government wants to focus on completing ongoing projects, our SMEs must have access to credit and allow to flourish because they are the engine that drives our economy and the largest job creator. Federal government should invest in our distressed people and communities in 2021.
Now, Titus Bondenok, this generation of students, let's say the current generation of students, they have suffered a lot from untold hardship, and it might take them a while to come out of it. They need to go back to school. If not, a ticking time bomb is waiting. This budget should address the ASU strike urgently.
And Dede Jack Solomon tweets, the 2021 budget, which has been themed the budget of economic recovery and resilience, will no doubt accelerate the pace of Nigeria's economic recovery, promote economic diversification, enhance competitiveness, and ensure social inclusion if it is well implemented by the government.
Leo Fadaka, rapid passage of 2021 budget is a great idea if only adequate revenue will be available for its diligent implementation, which is key to development and economic growth.
And Adamu Salisu tweets, the appropriation bill that has been passed with the previous one that has been extended to March 2021 can achieve 90% performance if oversight functions of National Assembly and other regulatory bodies will not demand for envelope and welcome packages.
All right, those are the tweets that we want to accommodate in the meantime. Well, this is not, we're not discussing our oil and gas issue, but it's just one of the fundamental assumptions that led us into, so look, crude oil production 1.86, crude oil price $40 per barrel, and what are the factors? Exchange rate, of course, has also dragged us into this, and what we need to do domestically. Niye, before we went on the short break, was talking about agriculture and our capacity to feed ourselves, but that's also linked to our ability to ramp up the value chain. chain because we have post-harvest losses, huge post-harvest losses, and sometimes you look around and you're asking yourself, what exactly are we doing along the value chain? We discussed here the request by state governments, to borrow more funds, more especially from the pension funds. And they said infrastructure. And so look, we can use the phrase loosely and say, oh, infrastructure. What kind of infrastructure are we going to see? Are we seeing infrastructure in the rural areas that will link the farm gate, to the market, and so on and so forth? But nobody is talking about that. If it is in the urban area, you want to have reticulation for urban water supply. Now, but what is the economics of water? Are people ready to pay for water if you have that? So it's one of those things that that keep coming, and when we have to deal with. Well, Prof, again, just dealing with the absolute numbers around the economy, we're expecting a growth rate of around 3%. I don't know how realistic this might be, but even that 3% that we are looking at, plus debt servicing of 3.3 trillion naira, which is just under 25% of the total quantum of the budget. But one area that perhaps we'll also be concerned about, and I haven't seen this reflected, is if the national aggregate gives us a growth rate of 3%, that is still below our population growth rates, and therefore, how do we ensure prosperity going forward?
Is a tough one, to be honest. And it's not just the population growth rate, which is about 3.2%, but there's an urbanization growth rate, which is 4.66%, which means that the incipient migration of people for today is 50% balance, but by 2030, it will be 75% in the urban area. And then you also have to link the fact that the youth are not actually going into agriculture. So with the average age of the farmer, now 65, who is going to actually grow the food to support 300 million population in 2030, where 70% of them, 200 million of them, are in the urban area. And if you look at inflation, the urban sub-index has gone above the composite headline inflation, which is very strange because while the rural is about 30, the other one has gone above. It's very, very significant because it shows you that the inflation is steaming at the urban center. It's very, very heavy at the urban center. So we need to actually go back to the drawing board in that particular respect. And I also like to connect to your comment about performance, budget performance. Yes. Now, as at the end of July, the budget performance was 68%. By now, it's well over 80%. And extending the budget spend to March means we are heading to 90-something%. So that would be good. Because in the end of the day, it is the capital budget that we are extending their spend, which means more to go to employment, and those are the kind of area where the recovery will come from. And also, there's a lot of palliatives in the current budget that are going to be heading to household. Okay. And why is this significant? We can spend all our time talking about output, but if you don't direct resources to the household and micro and informal sector for consumption purposes, 84% of our GDP, if you break it down to consumption, is coming from there. Government is only 5.7%. So if you don't have money there, you create a lot of output, but there's nobody to buy them. You're not exporting. So we have more. We'll be back to square one.
Okay, Ministry of Works and Housing got the highest in the budget. Nigerians are groaning under housing deficits. Like Kingsley said, connectivity between the roads, there should be a connectivity between works and housing and agriculture. Because if you farm this produce and you don't have good roads to take them to your destination, it rots. And talking about agriculture, shouldn't we have companies that have all these things, tomato, orange, and that get spoiled for not getting to the destination on time? Can't we have companies to have this juice company? Shouldn't the agricultural ministry invest in production of this kind of things?
In responding to that, we also need to understand the nature of our federal system. There are certain responsibilities that are exclusively the responsibilities of the federal government, the exclusively responsibility of the states and the local governments. When we have one checks, not to talk of two. shaken, it would impact, the delivery on all this. We have federal roads, we have state roads, we have local government roads. Trunk ABC, as they used to put it back in the days. Now, it's expected that the local government will provide roads from the farm, to link up the Trunk B roads. Then the state will provide roads to link up the Trunk A roads. So there's an integration, of the highways, as it were. Now, but of course, you have seen a local government system that had more or less become dysfunctional, And you have also seen state deliveries on roads that had become more political than being economic. Now, roads are essentially defined in the context of economy because roads must link up for economic purpose. You must move from an economic source and deliver to another economic source. And that is why, for instance, the Lagos-Ibadan railway line was supposed to be a passenger carriage from Edo to Ibadan. But now, the federal government said it's better you link it to the port. That is where you get the economic purpose. And the same thing should be replicated on our roads. So no matter what the federal government is doing, if we have development just only on our highways, it will not impact economic growth going into the urban, into the rural areas. You of course, I'd heard now that there is a special intervention of about 300 and something roads in the rural areas by the federal government. It's an intervention. It should not be an intervention. It should be statutory. And statutory comes from the local government. The local government should be able to understand those roads that starts from the farm gates. And that's where the first problem.
The money?
They have. If the federal government is funding certain things, it's from the same resources, the monthly allocation, that the federal government is doing that. If the states are doing this thing, it's also from the allocation. The local governments have allocation. It's not just about allocation. The Constitution specifically itemized those fiscal items that the local government can creatively exploit and generate income for themselves. But unfortunately, again, these have been morphed, into what the states do. So my thinking is that we need to go. We are talking of restructuring and all that. Can we first realize
fix the local government?
Fix the local government. It's important. I am a major advocate, of local government functionality, because that is where you have the bulk of the people. So many people. If you have 3 million people in the local government, for instance, 2.8 million of those people have no business going outside the boundaries of that local government to do anything,
including primary healthcare centers,
primary schools, good roads, lighting and all that.
Conducive environment for growth.
You can generate power for a local government and distribute. So it's a local government can be self-dependent, as it were. So once we focus on that system, 40% of our basic constitutional, political, economic headache will start, being addressed.
All right, thank you very much. Well, gentlemen, first, Prof. It appears that by some alchemy, and that's to say the overlapping of the 2020 Appropriation Act and the 2021 Appropriation Act, as it might become, if the President assents, might create some salutary effect in the works sector. Because one of the chief complaints always was that the budget ran from January to December, capital expenditure, but that the bulk of their work gets to be done during the dry season. So we have an extension of life now for the 2020 appropriation Act up until March next year, which will still be in the dry season.
Correct.
And then, of course, the president should have before him the 2021 appropriation bill as passed by the National Assembly for his consideration and eventual assent. What would you like to see taking advantage of this extended life of the 2020 Appropriation Act with respect to works in particular, because this is the time that we should actually see an escalation in terms of reconstruction, remodeling and all that?
Well, I think the good news about this is that not only are we going to be doing the 2020 budget in the dry season of January to March, but also because the budget is passed early, then procurement will start. So that by February or so, end of January, February, then you will now have concurrent spend, because procurement is the issue. No, the easiest way to go to jail in Nigeria, apart from robbery, is procurement. You are there. The law was so well written that you'll be going in, try and split and all that, you're going to jail. So that's the good news on that. But of course, we should expect the ministry to make the best use of this. There would also, if they didn't allow the continuation of this, then there would have been a case of rolling it over to the next one, which would also impede the fresh projects coming into. So both we now have a two-lane traffic.
Monitoring and oversight has always been a challenge.
I know. You see, I remember during the Jonathan administration, I was always screaming on monitoring. Then the national planning got quarterly monitoring. And then they were now having results of first, second, third quarter before they go into the budget round. So I now talked to the National Assembly and said, so what's going on now? Why don't you just focus on budget defense rather than tell them we must monitor before we look at your... They said they don't have money to go. I said, what do you mean by you don't have money? For you to go and... Don't you have it in your budget? You see the point? Okay. So that arm of government is keeping up with monitoring and publishing the quarterly monitoring report. Then it's now going to be, would the other play their part? But I think there is a convergence in the workings of these two parties now that I'm so comfortable, and you've seen the results of the large-scale cooperation. Yes. I have not seen both houses work so effectively from decades. During the time of Obasanjo, he was busy sacking all the Senate presidents, one after another. I think about 4 or 5 of them were sacked. Then in the first dispensation, you saw what happened. They made sure that every budget was 6 months late, 6 to 7 months late. And then they tell me it wasn't on purpose. But here, God has blessed us with two parties that are working to the clock and following the law and everything. So, I'll hesitate to throw spanners in their work.
They need to be commended.
Absolutely.
You don't want to listen to the underscore of that collaboration that we are seeing in the two chambers of the National Assembly.
Briefly.
Because, you don't want to listen to that. He doesn't want to listen to that.
Let's hear your
Let's get your closing thoughts.
Yes, let's have your closing thoughts.
My closing thoughts really will be actually from the position of Prof on what the Ministry of Works and Housing is doing. The truth of the matter is, yes, there's a bulk allocation for road construction and housing construction and all that. But roads to where? It has been a major headache. We have a 150-kilometer stretch of road. You're doing 30 kilometers of that because there's a need for political equity and balancing. I think it is wrong. There's a need to adopt a model to take on a road. And I think I had the finance minister say something about it.
That as well. Good morning, Nigeria.
Take this stretch of road, 150, 200 kilometers, complete
and deliver.
We know that if we are going to a particular point, once we get on that road, it's 200 kilometers of road, good roads, and it reduces travel time, it enhances comfort and comfortability. If you're able to do 200 times 4 routes in a year. That's 800 kilometers. Within 3-4 years, you can deliver on close to 3,000 kilometers.
All right, Niyi Akinsiju, financial and investment analyst and a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, I would like to thank you for being with us this morning. Also, economic policy analyst, Professor Kenife, a delight always having you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, so that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. I would like to thank you for tuning in. Program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Remember, stay safe and be well. It's the festive season. Of course, Santa Claus is around, but do enjoy yourself and be sure that you are safe and well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. As Kingsley said, remember to be safe and well. Only the living will be able to enjoy the budget. Thank you so much for being part of the program.